Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our session on building a purpose-driven law firm. I'm your host, Niamh Pollack. I am Vice President of Legal at Clio, which means I'm Clio's lawyer. Businesses around the world have come to recognize that both mission and purpose are key components of success. At Clio, our mission is to transform the legal experience for all. And hopefully everyone here today is experiencing a component of that transformation right here at ClioCon. And if you're not, come see me afterwards and we'll sort you out. As a purpose-driven company, Clio is committed to increasing better access to justice. We're democratizing how legal services are managed and accessed by providing a low-barrier, affordable, cloud-based solution available to all lawyers. At Clio, we know that customers use their buying power to select providers that match their values and purpose, not just with words, but also with action. And it's no different for law firms. Clients seek out service providers whose purpose most closely aligns with their own interests. So how does one build a purpose-driven law firm? Well, I've invited an expert here to tell us. I'm very honored to welcome our guest speaker, Chinwe Ohanele. Chinwe is a content junkie, a serial entrepreneur, an attorney, and a founder of Ohanele Law. She's licensed in California, New York, and New Jersey, and her boutique law firm provides underestimated creators and entrepreneurs with business and intellectual property legal services. Centering education as a core value of her firm, Chinwe hosts weekly Instagram sessions called the Legal Lunch Hour for her community, and she also teaches as an adjunct professor at USC's Gold School of Law. Through her thought-provoking blog, The Content Biz, Chinwe discusses the impact that content and creativity has on industry and culture. In addition to her work as an advocate, thought leader, and educator, she continues to interface with legal practitioners, government agencies, and institutions, focusing on developing the creative sector in Nigeria and the continent of Africa at large. So, a very accomplished guest speaker, as you can see. Chinwe, thank you so much for joining us today, and it's over to you.
Thank you so much. So before I start, I'm going to suggest if you're in the back and there are open seats, move up. Let's pretend like we like each other. Come on. Don't be shy. All right. Now, I remember when the trailer came out in 2017. It was insane. Now, I wasn't sure if it was going to be a well-funded flop or a spectacular success. But either way, I was very excited for Black Panther's premiere in the theatrical release because it was the first time we had seen an African superhero on the major stage. But it got me thinking, are there indigenous comic books on the continent of Africa? Now, as a Nigerian, I felt like I should know this, but I didn't. So I hopped on Google, did a quick Google search, couldn't find a thing. So next thing I do, hop on Facebook. Was very surprised to find a group of African comic book publishers who had created a group. And, I hopped in and I asked a couple questions. Hey, do you guys have, comic books that have been around for a while? Are you excited about Black Panther? Now, those really simple, maybe naive questions opened Pandora's box. I learned a lot of things, like about the challenges around distribution, publishing, consistencies with printing, and let's not even get started on the issues with copyright, trademark, and general IP issues on the continent, enforcing and protecting your rights. What started as a very simple exchange advanced to an invitation to one of their weekly meetings. So I woke up at 3 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, rolled onto my computer, turned on Zoom, and on the other side was about 5 or 6 gentlemen huddled around a tent to keep the sun away from their eyes, and they were looking at me through the screen wondering, what does this girl all the way in the US want to know about our industry? What I didn't know is that call and those questions would lead to the launch of Unicon Africa. a 2-day convention that myself and 2 other women from the US would put on in partnership with this community. A business summit and a traditional convention was the way that we entered this ecosystem to learn deeply about what it meant to create content on the continent of Africa. But see, before that happened, there were a couple of really risky decisions I made. For example, deciding to plan a convention from 7,000 miles away, to attempt to fundraise for this event with people who, Africa has comics? Yes, we have comics. And then finally, the riskiest move of all. 3 months before the event, as someone who's planned events at the college level, understanding that the littlest detail can literally upend an event, I realized that we needed boots on the ground. Not just any boots, though, our boots. So I marched into my supervisor's office, knowing full well that I was not about to get leave for 3 months, and quit from the highest paying job I had had as an attorney up until that moment. I quit, headed out to Lagos, Nigeria, and spent 3 months working hand in hand to make this convention work. Now, I tell this story because of the purpose for me in law is really about leveraging my skills and my education to the benefit of this community. Now, you might think, well, why all the way in Nigeria? Right? There are plenty of creatives here. But it's also about impact and the ability to have an impact on a community that probably wouldn't have access to someone like me back home. So, fast forward a few years, we have now a comic book publisher that signed a deal with HBO Max to launch an animated series based off of their graphic novel. We have another comic book publisher whose content is licensed. Their content is on Disney Plus right now. And another publisher who's being represented by one of the largest agencies, CAA, in the world. Now, all that tells me is, sure, our instincts were right, but also there's value in following your purpose. So, 2020, in the middle of the pandemic, 3 years after this life-changing experience, I start my own practice, building a boutique that leverages these skills, this education, but on my own terms and in the way that I see fit. So during this hour, we're going to talk about what it means to build a purpose-driven law firm, what it looks like, what it feels like. And from my perspective, especially because my practice is client-centered, how you center your client in building this purpose. So, to introduce myself again, my name is Chinwe Ohanele, or Chinwe Ohanele as my mother would call me. As has already been said, I am a content junkie. I watch all things, whether international or domestic. I'm a serial entrepreneur. I've partnered with people in various industries to build businesses, and most importantly, as an IP and business attorney, I get to leverage all of those experiences to the benefit of my clients. But let's start somewhere that we probably all understand pretty well. When I went to law school, I didn't think that I would walk out being labeled. I figured, I'm gonna get some skills, I'm gonna get some clients, and we're just gonna, change the world. But when I started my practice, the most common thing I heard was, wow, you're not like a lot of attorneys. Most attorneys are really intimidating. And I was like, what? Really? But apparently, there's something about lawyers that makes people think about soul-sucking demons who steal your money. Literally, I don't understand it. Where's our PR? We need to get this fixed. Because for some reason, all people think about are As you can see here, the fancy offices with giant desks, wood-paneled conference rooms, and maroon leather chairs. I don't have any of those things. So, whoever our suppliers are need to do a better job. But this is the image that people think about when they think about lawyers. They don't think about people who want to champion their, goals and dreams. They think about literally someone who's gonna, give them a hard time. And maybe they're also thinking about Law and Order, those moments where, the witness is crying on the witness stand, right? That's the image they have of lawyers. So I think that part of building a purpose-driven law firm is addressing this particular stereotype, because it's one of the biggest barriers that we have to people actually coming to us, to speaking to us, to reaching out to us before there's a problem. Because I think that one of the most powerful things we can do is be proactive with the law, not always be reactionary. Especially in my area with IP and business law, there are all sorts of things that we can do for clients before they get into trouble. And so this, I think, is a common place to start. But then where do we go from there? So there are three things that I think that we can do to build purpose-driven law firms that also center our clients. So the first is communication. Legalese, jargon, right? This is the stuff that makes us successful at drafting contracts, at arguing successfully in court. But it sometimes is also the thing that confuses our clients, makes it difficult for them to feel at ease to communicate their biggest and most thorny problems. And so this is something that we really need to think about. The other thing is supporting non-traditional business owners or clients. Not everyone fits in the traditional box, right? Your client may not come in the way that you anticipate that they'll come. But how do you meet them where they are, despite their background, despite what circumstances they're in? And finally, anti-bias advocacy as an opportunity for growth. I think this is critical, especially because if you are seeking to serve diverse communities, there's a level of work that we need to do as lawyers, as advocates, to make sure that we can represent our clients regardless of their country, their ethnicity, their sexual orientation, whatever identity they claim. We need to figure out how we can best support them and advocate for them. So, in true content junkie style, I recently finished a show called Vincenzo on Netflix. It's a Korean drama. I don't know if any of you watch Korean dramas, but they have a chokehold on me, and I need them to let go. So Vincenzo is a story about a Korean immigrant who lived in Italy, and he was a lawyer, and somehow becomes the consigliere for the mafia. And so after he's done some stuff, he takes all those skills and goes back to Korea, and masquerading as an attorney there, he helps this humble group of ragtag shop owners, business owners, and tenants to save their building and save it from a conglomerate that's trying to take it over. And what was really cool about Vincenzo is that at the end of the day, he, like all lawyers, takes all of his experience, all of his skills, and applies it to that situation. And I think that in the same way, how do we become the counselors that our clients need? So for me, as the consigliere for creatives, I meet KJ. He is the founder of Black Food Fridays. And during the pandemic, he decided with all of these Black restaurants that are having trouble sustaining their business because a lot of restaurants weren't open, they were trying to pivot to some kind of model where people could do takeout. A lot of Black businesses were suffering either because people didn't know about them or weren't patronizing them. So he started a hashtag. as the millennials will and the Gen Zs will, hashtag campaigns, right? Black Food Friday. So every Friday when you go to a Black-owned establishment, you take a picture and you hashtag Black Food Friday. And this humble beginning started kind of a movement. And he built a community of people who were interested in supporting Black food vendors, which was fantastic. But then he was like, well, I'm doing all of these, things online. How do I turn this more into a business that is sustainable? And are there things I'm not thinking about? And so one of my clients referred him to me because I'd done an impromptu business legal strategy session for them, and I was like, I can't do this anymore. And they were like, oh, no, you have to. There are all sorts of people that need this. And so KJ comes to me, he's like, I really need help putting some framework around this thing that I've created. And so after 4 hours on a Saturday, which, trust me, it was very long and very exhausting, KJ leaves very excited about the future of Black Food Friday. And these are his words on social media. And he said, speaking with Chinwe Ohanele about Black Food Friday, what Black Food Fridays can be in 5 to 10 years was worth every single cent. She has left me both excited and frightened, confident and overwhelmed. The phrase, I have to take a fear shit, was used. And while it won't make sense outside the friendly confines of our private conversation, just know that I'm more excited about the future than I was before today. And I already thought that Black Food Friday was headed in a positive direction. How often do our clients leave talking to us, speaking to us, excited about the future? How often do we speak hope into their dreams and vision? We have the opportunity to do that if we can think beyond the confines of our traditional legal practice. If we take more of a holistic approach to what does this particular legal issue have to do with the rest of your life, your business, right? And so when you think about language, it's not just about the language that you use on the contract, on the brief, or in the courtroom. It's also the language that you use with your clients in those meetings, in those conversations. Now, I'm not saying that everyone should block off 4 hours on a Saturday to have a conversation with their clients, because maybe that's not your jam. But even if it's 15 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes that you spend discussing with your client, do you know who your client is? Do you know what their dreams and hopes are? Do you know what your project, your legal, solution, what impact that's going to have on the rest of what they're doing, what they're building? That's an opportunity for you to dig a little bit deeper and have impact where you might not otherwise have been able to. Now, when we're talking about non-traditional business owners, this can be, for me, obviously I deal with business owners, but non-traditional clients, they don't always come in the packaging you expect. But I think the key with these particular clients is that they look at the world in a very different way, especially given the fact that law is a very conservative and very traditional field. It can be kind of hard to get out of the box, right? When you go to law school, nobody's telling you, go out there and innovate. That's not the way that works. The law is slow and intentionally slow for that reason, right? You don't want the law changing every 5 seconds. But within the tradition and the stability that we provide, we can still make room and make space for people like this, right, who see the world in a different way. So one of my clients, Afropolitan Nation, came to me maybe last year to file a trademark for them. And their business is essentially to build a digital nation for members of the African diaspora. Now, I know nothing about DAOs and NFTs and those kinds of things. So I couldn't tell you the first thing about building a digital nation. But I thought, this is a unique concept. This is different. I haven't seen this before. And they were in the middle of fundraising. And anyone who knows anything about fundraising, you want to make sure that most of your assets are locked down so that your investors have a clear idea of what they're putting their money into. And so it made sense for them to file a trademark. And so for them, they were busy being visionaries, seeing the world in a different way, building things that we may not even see the fruit of for decades. But I was busy helping them with today, making sure that they owned their trademark. And thank goodness we did, because very soon after, we got a cease and desist from a company that was alleging that they were infringing on their trademark. Thankfully, they were not. And we'd already filed in the appropriate class, and we responded to the cease and desist. But what's great about this is they're free to build and build fast and be wild and crazy, while I help them build the foundation that allows them to do that. And so a couple weeks ago, they, with one of their investors, they rang the New York Stock Exchange bell to let everyone know that a new nation on behalf of African diaspora is on the way. And so in many ways, looking to the future and also looking to the present, being able to stand in the unknown with my client, providing them the resources that I can to help them bridge that gap is critical. But if I had allowed my confusion about this non-traditional model to sort of have me turn them away, who knows what would have happened with their trademark, with their brand, with the business that they were building, right? So it was a real honor to work on this particular project. Now, the last piece and the last leg of building a purpose-driven law firm is really around bias. And I think that people get a little nervous about bias because it can get controversial and it can get touchy and tricky, right? We never want to feel like we're harming or hurting anyone. But at the end of the day, self-confrontation is really critical to true advocacy. Because even I have biases that I need to confront. And if I don't confront them, they can rear their head when I deal with particular clients. And my ability to strongly and clearly advocate for them will be impacted. And so if I don't do the work on the inside to make sure that I'm mindful of those things, my clients might suffer. So what does that look like? So one of the clients that I had recently, my practice is largely virtual remote practice, so most of my client meetings are via Zoom. And so one day, I sign on to my Zoom, and a really friendly Asian American woman is sitting on the other side of the screen. And I'm like, okay, well, I'm happy to meet you. Tell me a little bit about your business. And she said, well, I'm in the finance field, but I'm working on a sexual health business because I think that it's really important not only for me to work in this space, but as an Asian American woman to remove some of the stigma associated with this space. I was like, okay, that's I've never seen that before. That's great. And she says, well, and also one of my products is going to use cannabis. I was like, wow, okay, pushing a lot of envelopes here. And now she's based in California. My firm is based in California, and so it is legal. But those are two very tricky spaces, depending on your background, your identity, and your culture. And so for me, I'm Nigerian American. We are very conservative. And both of those things are not things that my mother or father have ever talked about in the household. All I know is they are off limits. You do not do them. You are not allowed. And so I could have carried some of those perceptions with me into this meeting. I could have prejudged my client, her business, her model, and again, turned her away Or I might not have known how to approach, advocating for her, providing quality legal services. But the first thing I had to think about and ask myself is, what is my perception? What is my perception of my client and or the business? I have to be clear on that. I have to know how I feel about that. Once you surface that, right, I'm meeting with a client who seeks to set up a sex-positive cannabis brand as an Asian American. Now, how do I filter that information? What does my brain do with this neutral info that I've just collected, right? Can I recognize possible challenges my client will face due to the intersectional nature of her identity and the product that she's developing? Can I act as an ally through the process without patronizing her? And the patronizing is key because our dynamic, I'm the expert right now in the law. I have the ability to support and uplift, right? Or I can do something that's less helpful, right? I've had several clients who come to me who say, oh, I went to a law firm with my idea and they told me that's not an invention, who would buy that? Is that really the law firm's role, to tell a client whether or not their idea is valuable? What if you're not the target market? What if you know nothing about that industry, right? So it's important to think about how I'm filtering this information in a way that is helpful to my client. Then, does my view on the world limit my ability to see or hear my client clearly? Are there questions I need to ask her? And are there questions I need to seek answers to on my own? Now, for diverse communities, there are questions that you might get that it's like Google. Google exists, right? We can all Google things. We can all seek information. One of the things that I do before I do some of my consultations, and I'll just look up the business, see what I can find online so that I'm prepared for that consultation just as much as my client is coming prepared to work with me. And so there are some things that we can do in advance of working with and speaking with our clients that take some of the pressure off of them having to explain who they are, explain why something matters to them, so that we can focus on the vision, the impact, the business, the product, the thing that they're so excited about doing. And then active participation. When all else fails, compassion and present engagement opens the door to meaningful attorney-client relationships. Sometimes you just don't know what to do. You just don't know what to say. And that's when true and sincere honesty with your client can do wonders. This is a really interesting business that you have. I'm struggling with this. Can you help me understand this a little bit better? Because I want to be able to provide the best service for you. Compassion. That's really where some of this boils down to. Now, let's say you've done all of these things. You've managed your communication, you've opened yourself to non-traditional clients, and you've checked your bias at the door. How do you measure? How do you measure this? I think we're all very good at reviews, checking the reviews, making sure our clients give you either 5 stars or, a paragraph about the efficacy of your solution and all those things. But I think that we could go a little bit deeper and think about the stories. I think as human beings, we're moved by stories more than we are a 5-star review. Because those stories that your clients tell, it's not just for the internet, it's for their friend, that they're catching up with. It's with the person in the checkout line, or it's the person that they run into at a conference. People like to tell stories. And wouldn't you want your clients to tell incredible stories about you and how it is to work with you? So I think the first place to start is, who are you? I don't know if there are too many venues or spaces that tell attorneys to ask themselves these kind of questions. I think there are other industries that are a little bit more comfortable with, thinking deeply about who we are. But for me, when I started thinking about what it means to build a purpose-driven law firm, yeah, I'm a content junkie, I'm a serial entrepreneur. Sure, I run a law firm, but I'm also an immigrant. I became licensed in all 3 states before I became a citizen in this country, right? And I'm the oldest of 5 siblings, so responsibility matters to me. I've had to interface between myself and my parents a lot of times to navigate this new culture. And so communication and compassion matter. I learned how to speak my native language again through creativity by reading books written in my native language. So I value creativity as a capsule for culture. So who are you? What are your values? Then who are your clients, right? Sometimes we take that for granted because we're really quick to figure out who's gonna buy my services. Who's got the money to pay at the end of the quarter or month? Who's going to pay my billables? Who are my clients? But on a deeper level, who your clients could matter, because how can you fulfill your purpose if you're speaking to the wrong audience? My clients are creatives. They're people who seek to have an impact in the world with their products, their services, their content. But above all, they're people with stories. And they're people with stories that I believe in, and I want to advocate on their behalf. So it's really important for me to know who my clients are, because I will go to the ends of the earth for them, because I believe that deeply in what they're doing and what they're building. But if they're not really a great match for me, if they're just in it to make money, which is fine, maybe they're not the ideal client for me. So it's important to know who your clients are. Next, where do you place value in your practice? Now, for our practice, and I have this conversation with my team all the time, I want my clients to feel like they matter. At every stage, I want them to feel like they matter. Not just in general, but they matter to us. And maybe that's at the expense of our feelings or our egos. Sometimes taking a step back and rethinking how it is my communication, my delivery is being seen by my clients. But that's our practice value. You have to figure out what your practice value is. And then finally, if your clients were to tell stories about working with you, what would they say? If you were a fly on the wall at a cocktail party, right? And you had a client and someone was like, oh man, I'm dealing with this legal issue. What's the story your client's gonna tell? If you can't think of one, then we can move on to the next, which is, how do you move beyond reviews and into true human connection? There's no formula for this. There's no sort of cookie cutter way to do it. We all have different practice areas which have different impact on people's lives. So that's sort of the art to building your practice. But there have to be ways that you intentionally create space and room for people to truly open themselves, to tell you the things that perhaps they wouldn't feel comfortable telling another attorney. And what I found in creating that space is that when they do open up and they do tell you these things, oftentimes it really makes my job easier. Because then I know what their motivations are. Then I know, if I'm negotiating a contract with the other side, I actually know what they care about. But if I hadn't created that space, I might be off to the left while my client is off to the right. And so it's really thinking about how to move intentionally into those spaces for human connection. So I know I started this session, talking about how I wildly left my job and flew out to Nigeria and, put on a convention and then came back to the States and started this law firm. But the thing about building a purpose-driven law firm, aside from the impact that it has on your clients, is the impact it has on you, the fulfillment that it gives you. Our practice is riddled with people who are unhappy doing their work. And I think purpose is one of the ways that we can bring some of that joy back. For me, in just the few months that I've started my practice, I'm on this stage sharing my story with you. I'm doing a master class on intellectual property in Ivory Coast next month to talk about how intellectual property frameworks are going to be developed on the continent of Africa. If I hadn't taken the leap to chase purpose and to build something that would have impact for my clients, I probably wouldn't be doing these things. I wouldn't have these stories. And some of my clients wouldn't have the enthusiastic advocate that they have now. I wouldn't be going to sleep and waking up with client solutions. I literally will just thinking about this, and then I'll wake up the next morning I have to call this client. I thought of another thing. But it doesn't feel like a burden to me. It doesn't feel like I'm being sucked dry. Instead, it's rejuvenating. It's exciting. It makes those 3 grueling years of law school worth it. And I think that is the opportunity that we have when we build a purpose-driven law firm, to bring the joy and the happiness back, to bring true meaning to attorney-client relationships, and to helping people bring their vision to life in whatever practice area that we have. Thank you.
Thank you, Chinwe. That was an incredible session.
Thank you.
Wow. I have a lot of questions. We also will open questions to the floor. I believe there's someone roaming with a mic, so if you have a question, please raise your hand, and if we don't find the mic, just shout it out. But I'm going to start because I've got a lot of questions. So, Chinwe, where did you learn what it means to be a lawyer? We've clearly seen your passion and your intellect, your skills. I mean, heading to the Ivory Coast to help the continent form intellectual property laws, that's definitely a first I've heard. That's super impressive, so congratulations. But tell us a little bit about, where did you learn what it means to be a lawyer?
So the funny thing is, I didn't learn what it meant to be a lawyer. I learned how you shouldn't be a lawyer.
Okay, please tell us. We all want to hear.
So as I mentioned, I'm an immigrant, and I think I just became a citizen 2 months ago, after being in this country since I was 3 years old. And so you might wonder, how that's 30 years, right? Well, the truth is, going through the immigration system, unfortunately, my parents, being immigrants is a very vulnerable position because you rely very heavily on your legal representation, right? Most times you may not understand not only the language enough to advocate for yourself, but even the legal system is very unfamiliar. And I just watched my family go from attorney to attorney who didn't really care about what they were going through. They had 5 young children that they were trying to, raise in this country, and they were just being mishandled, getting bad advice, being told, "Oh, fly to this country or this state, file here," and always having to like go to court and just stand at, to show, oh, here are their 5 kids. And I just felt like, what is this performance that we're doing? And at the end of the day, no one can tell us when this is going to end. When will this be resolved? When will we fix this, right? And it wasn't until I got to college and I started really listening to the proceedings that I realized some of these lawyers don't actually care. They're not doing that much work on this file. And ultimately, my mother ended up getting her citizenship without an attorney and had to represent herself before immigration court. And I ended up being left out, which is part of the reason that I got mine so late, because the attorney who handled my case was supposed to have me as a derivative of my mother's, and on the final petition, I was dropped off. And so I now had to figure out, now mind you, I've finished law school at this point. Like, I'm done with law school and someone's telling me, oh yeah, we're not exactly sure where your file is, we don't know what's going on. Maybe you can represent yourself? I was like, really? Okay, sure. My first act as a law school graduate is figuring out how to fix my immigration case. And so I think that was what really stuck with me. The fact that nobody was that invested in us and in our story and what we had to go through to get here and stay here. So yeah.
That's incredible. I'm also an immigrant and did my own immigration paperwork. So we're joint survivors there, you and me. If you can get through immigration, you can tackle literally anything. So that's a great story. How do you think you show up as a lawyer that doesn't fall into the traditional mold? Like, we've seen your passion, we've learned a little bit about your path, but I think we can default into just lawyer-ese, lawyer speak. And what we've learned from your experience is that the connection is the key. So what are the tips you would give us to not default back into that lawyer speak mode? How can we be more like you, Chinwe?
I think, honestly, I try to think if okay, so don't take this to the extreme, but I kind of treat my clients like friends. So I'm genuinely curious about them. I ask questions and I listen very carefully. And I think it's so sad, but I feel like a lot of my clients are surprised by my genuine interest and the fact that I'll remember things about them. Like, oh, you mentioned that your daughter, her birthday was last week. How was that? Something that simple can really change the dynamic with your clients. And it's really, I don't know, I think it comes down to being curious about people and just taking the time to listen carefully. And another way that you can do it is, make notes. After you finish a consultation, if you learn something about your client that speaks to who they are as a person, jot it down in their client file. You can always have it there so that you can reference it. Another thing is be genuine. One of my clients was having a really tough time during COVID, and their family member got sick, and we sent a care package. It's like, that's normal. Someone is having a tough time. You send them something to say that, you hope they're doing well. And you'd be surprised how far that went, because for them, they were like, wow, you care about me as a human being. I'm so happy that I'm working with someone like you. So they're not really grand things. They're just little things that I think each and every one of us would appreciate if someone were to do for us.
Absolutely. I can totally relate. I have an unusual name. I'm from Ireland, and it's very easy to get it wrong. And occasionally there'll be someone who will say to me, I looked up your name and I know how to pronounce it. And it's that little moment of human connection where I feel this person is invested in me, and I'm going to remember that gesture. So I think what you're hitting on, like, those are the moments where we feel that connection. Yeah. I love it. Okay, tell me more about your legal origin story. Like, what made you want to be a lawyer? We learned about your process of having to represent as an immigrant, but how did you go from that experience to running your own practice?
So I'll tell you that I was pretty sure that I was going to work for someone for the rest of my life. I really had zero interest in starting my practice. I was actually trying to make a pivot. So I'd started while I was in law school helping out a digital magazine restructure their business. And was fascinated by the process, and I was like, oh, this is interesting. And I'd taken digital media and the law and a bunch of intellectual property classes in law school. So I pretty much knew that if I was going to be a lawyer, I wanted to do that kind of law. And then I graduated, and I needed a job. And so I took the first job that I got, which was in workers' compensation, defense side, which was like, if entertainment is all the way over here, workers' comp is all the way over here, right? So you sort of like take the job that, picks you, and you start doing the stuff, and you're just like, oh man, this is not it. I'm shuffling Monopoly money, and I'm making all of these arguments on behalf of a client that I'm not really passionate about. And then COVID happened. And during the pandemic, a couple of things made it really important for me to reevaluate my legal trajectory. One is there was a lot of uproar and social commentary around George Floyd. And that was a really challenging time because I think collectively we were processing something, but I think individually each person had to sort of process that for themselves as well. And then another thing that happened in October of 2021, I believe, is in Nigeria, there was protests against SARS, which is a special unit of the police that was abusing their power, and they were targeting largely young Nigerians. And in October, there was a protest near the bridge, and the government has its views on what happened, but a number of people lost their lives that day. And I remember sitting in the office, which happened to be wood paneled, and just feeling very lost and wondering, is this really what my life is meant for? Representing insurance companies in administrative proceedings? Or should I really be doing the thing that I feel has been put on my heart, which is to support these entrepreneurs who literally have the ability to change the world? I strongly believe in private enterprise. And as someone who comes from a country that struggles with infrastructure and government and all those things, I mean, there are a lot of African countries that rely on private enterprise to lift a number of people out of unemployment. And so at that time, I didn't know what to do, so I went to a Thanksgiving dinner at my sister's house in Atlanta. The whole family was there. And my siblings, most of my family's in healthcare. So my parents are nurses, my sister is gonna be a doctor, one of my other sisters is a nurse. It's just me and my brother who are like weirdos. He's an engineer. And so I'm telling my siblings, I'm like, you guys are so lucky. All you have to do is graduate. Mom and dad can get you a job. Me, I don't know anyone, this thing that I want to do, nobody can help me. And my dad looks me square in the face and says, do you want to start your own law firm? Now, to qualify this, my father is a very conservative Nigerian man who believes very strongly in pensions and working like 20 years for a company and retiring. And so for him to ask me, do you want to start a law firm, was like the heavens had parted and like light was shining on me. And I was like, yeah, I kind of do. And he said, okay, then do it. And so that November is when I made the decision to quit my job. And by January of the following year, I started my practice. So that's really how I ended up doing this thing that I never thought I would do.
Wow. So it's multiple steps in the journey. So you have your practice now up and running. I think a lot of people may find their own purpose, hopefully, after your inspiring session. But how do you attract like-minded people into your firm such that, they continue with that vision and don't delve into the lawyerese? So how do you do that?
I think that some of it is you being clear on the practice that you want to build. And I think it's hard in the beginning because any practice that you're starting, I had this conversation with someone yesterday. It's kind of like a kid. Like you have a child and you name it, but then it's going to grow into who it wants to become, right? And so right now, sure, my practice has a name and it has a vision, but it's also kind of a collaboration between me, my team, my clients, and where I started is certainly not where I am even today. This work that I'm doing in, intellectual property with the continental piece is, I never in a million years thought that I'd be doing that, right? But it's going to spaces with where like-minded people are, having conversations, being passionate. I think that there's maybe a little bit of a stigma associated with passionate lawyers. And I think that that's wrong. We should be passionate about what we believe in. And when you're passionate, those people who are passionate about those things, they'll resonate with that. And you draw those people in. I can't tell you the number of times that I'm geeking out about the Marvel Cinematic Universe or one random intellectual property thing, and someone's like, "You too?" And all of a sudden, that becomes my new bestie. And I think that those are the kinds of things we need to be willing to allow ourselves to have full human experiences as well. Those are great ways to connect with people who believe in the same things you do.
They're out there.
Yeah,
Just
they're
gotta
out
find them.
there.
Yeah. No, that's excellent. I want to give the audience the chance to ask questions. We have a mic at the back, but you're right at the front, so maybe just, project.
Thank you so much for your inspirational talk, and I want to just dovetail off your last question, which was a perfect intro, which is I have a team, and I'm trying to motivate them. And so, I've read Traction and EOS, and I'm familiar with all this management stuff that I never knew or thought I needed to know about. And I'm trying to figure out, KPI, what the heck is that? Key performance indicator. And I'm talking to my team about I want an indicator that actually captures the purpose. I want an indicator that we can use as an objective number or a data point that we can use to show our success. Because that is what I'm selling. That's what I started my firm for. But I don't know how to go from here to there. Do you have any ideas?
What comes to mind is something that I think other industries do a lot, which is they do in-depth interviews of their customers, or they do focus groups. Something that happens by accident for me is, when I'm talking to my clients, again, this is probably a function of the early stage of my firm, but I let them talk. And so sometimes in sort of asking them questions, whether it's about my services or whatever, I don't have a clear oh, how have my services changed you? But I may check in, right? I might just do a check-in and say, hey, I'm just, I want to see how you're doing. How's everything going? And sometimes people will give you the information you're looking for without you directly poking at it if you give them the space to talk. I think the challenge in our industry is our billables. It's tough, honestly, because if you think about human interaction, the most meaningful interactions you might have don't necessarily happen within 0.6, 0.5, 1.2, right? They happen organically, and there have to be opportunities that you create so that those organic nuggets can come through. And so it could also be you take a couple of your clients out to lunch or dinner, right? And you just allow them to share a little bit about what's been going on. But yeah, I think it's tough to measure because it really takes creating space and not necessarily having a tick, which is why my suggestion is the stories, right? And oftentimes, if you get a referral, That's another way to catch the story, because sometimes I will hear the story from someone who was referred to me. They'd be like, oh yeah, I was, doing this and the other thing, and I was talking to one of your clients and they shared this thing that happened. I was like, oh, okay, that's good to know. They didn't tell me that, but they told you, so thank you. Right? So those are two things I would say. If you can create whether it's dinners, lunches, something like that, that has a little bit more space with certain clients, maybe those that you've worked with for a longer period of time, to sort of share, what working with you has meant to them, and then also digging a little bit deeper when you get referrals to hear what it was about what they heard that made them say, hey, I want to talk to this attorney.
We've just got a few more minutes. Any other questions from the audience? Just raise your hand. There's a mic, or just shout out if the mic doesn't make
Hi,
it to you.
Chinwe. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Over here. So I'm actually a Clio employee. I'm asking a question on behalf of someone who's attending virtually.
Sure.
So this question's from Anna. She said, I love the idea of intentionality, but is it a really difficult concept to have a team aligned with when there's no real and defined purpose? How can we bring a better understanding of these concepts to our firms?
That's a great question, and it's something that I had to deal with with my legal assistant like last month. So one of the pieces of our practice is the way that we communicate. It's intentionally very friendly, and even when there's conflict, we try to find a way to communicate it to the client so that it isn't aggressive. Because I think lawyers are seen to be naturally aggressive. And so there was an exchange between my legal assistant and a couple of clients that I saw because I was CC'd in it. And at reading it, I was like, this is aggressive. And so I immediately responded to that email string, and I said, my apologies if the tone was off. This is actually what we intended to communicate in this email. And then I asked my legal assistant to make some time on my calendar so that I could have a conversation with her. Now, instead of launching into, our core values are X, Y, and Z, I first said, are you okay? Is there anything going on? Are you stressed out? Because I know you to be someone who's compassionate and who communicates positively. And so this seems off. And so in the way that I communicate with my team, I have to model what it is I want them to do. If I turn around and yell at her because of the email, because she's too aggressive, what am I modeling, right? And I think that is really important, because sometimes I've worked in law firms where support staff has not been supported, and they're now supposed to extend this perception of the firm that, oh, we're friendly, we're wonderful, we're warm. But if I don't do that, if I don't model it as the managing partner and the founder, well then what are we actually doing? Sure, you can have procedures in place. You can have template emails that sort of give the staff a sense of how to do that, but it's not truly felt, right, if they don't feel like that's how the firm is operating internally. So some of it is modeling, and then some of it is putting down the processes and procedures to make it easier for them to communicate that way. I hope that was helpful.
Good question. Unfortunately, we're at time, which is a disappointment. But if you have any more questions, I don't know if you've got time to stick around afterwards.
Yeah, I'd be
Chinwe,
happy
and hopefully
to.
you'll be here for the whole conference. So thank you so much for this session. It was incredibly inspiring, and good luck with your purpose. I'm sure you'll be very successful over the years, and I hope you come back to ClioCon in the future.
Thank you so much.
Thank you
It's
so
been a
much.
pleasure.
Thank you.